throw them out, drive them out.
The Israeli High Command now faced a difficult choice. Ben-Gurion wanted to drive all Palestinians from territory seized by the Israeli army without wanting to make it public policy. The decision to prevent Palestinians from returning once they had fled was easier to make. Ben-Gurion and his commanders could justify this for reasons of military security. Sometimes the Israelis allowed the Palestinians to stay. In Nazareth, which fell to the Israelis in the same week as Lider Ramna, senior clergymen and town leaders persuaded Israeli officers not to drive their people out. Confrontation with the Christian churches with congregations in Nazareth was too great a risk for the fledgling Israeli state, anxious to win international approval. But in places out of the limelight, like Safuri, a Palestinian village 3 miles from Nazareth, the Israeli army applied its usual policy of eviction.
كانت في قيادة هون من العرب أجوا قعدوا يتضاربوا هن وياها القيادة انهزمت وإحنا ظلينا في البلد ورافعين أعلام بيضة تنظل بعد ما راحوا هدلاك طوقوا البلد وقالوا إذا واحد بيبقى فيها بنطخوا يا بنحبسه وهاللي وجدوه ظل بعد المسافة اللي أعطوهن إياها طخوه والباقي أطلعوه العاجز حملوه بالسيارات ويرموه على القرى بعدين أجوا مسكوها وهدوها إياها جابوا الغام وجابوا أشياء وصاروا هدوا في البلد.
On occasions, fanatical hatred among Israeli soldiers towards the Arabs led to massacres. On October the 29th, approximately 570 men, women and children were killed when soldiers from the Israeli 8th Brigade attacked the village of Duwaime in southern Palestine.
اللي حصل في الجامع يومها رأسا راحوا دخلوا الجامع وذبحوا الاختياري اللي فيه كلياتهم قتلوهم ورموهم في مصول الشيد. هذا اللي حصل. وفي الشوارع لما دخلوا ما كانش في عندهم لا شفقة ولا رحمة يعني بدوا الطخ اللي في الشوارع اللي يشوفوه يقتلوه واللي في الدور قتلوه الاختياري العجزي والعجائز الحريم الكبار. هذا اللي حصل.
From the very beginning, the Israeli government tried to obscure its responsibility for the Palestinian exodus.
As early as August of 1948, while the expulsions were still taking place, the Israeli foreign minister was writing a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations in which the myth was already evolving. He was telling the Secretary General of the UN that Palestinians had left on orders from local commanders and from the Arab Higher Committee. Of course, later on, Zionist propagandists elaborated on this and developed the entire myth that the Palestinians had not been expelled, indeed they had not fled, but it was part of a Palestinian conspiracy on orders from the Arab Higher Command telling their people to leave their homes, thus exonerating the Zionists from all guilt.
For nearly 40 years, Zionist myths about the Palestinian catastrophe have been accepted in the West as truth. But recently, historians researching among Israeli state papers and in the archives at the UN have concluded that the vast majority of Palestinians did not leave voluntarily. There were no Arab radio broadcasts telling them to leave. They left either through fear of massacre or as a direct result of killings and forcible eviction. Israel bears historical responsibility, not only for driving the Palestinians out, but also for preventing their return. In August 1948, Count Bernadotte tried to persuade the Israelis to allow some of the now 500,000 homeless Palestinians to return. This request, along with his proposals for a territorial solution of the Palestine dispute, was rejected by Moshe Sharett, Israel's foreign minister. Bernadotte now started to receive death threats. On September the 17th, 1948, while visiting Jerusalem, Bernadotte was ambushed by the Stern Gang. Along with a senior French UN official, he was shot dead in his car. Bernadotte's plans died with him. The initiative now lay with the Israelis. With nearly 70,000 regular troops, they faced Arab opponents lacking their numbers, fighting skills, and determination. Ben-Gurion could now exercise his government's authority without challenge. He had already suppressed the Irgun. Bernadotte's death now allowed him to move against the Stern Gang. He was now the undisputed political master of Israel, the principal architect of the new Jewish state. The final phase of the fighting could now begin.
We felt in the political level and the military level that the key to end the war would be the defeat of Egypt. Egypt was the most powerful Arab country, and no doubt once Egypt would be either politically and no doubt militarily out of the war, it would advance ending the war of independence.
From our point of view in the UN, it was a decisive turning point for Dr. Bunch, who had been trying all the time to negotiate some end to that fighting and get them to sit down and write an armistice and stop the war.
Arriving by air, the Egyptian delegation came to Rhodes for armistice talks with the Israelis. The meeting was being held at the Hotel des Roses under the auspices of UNO. The question of the Negev, the Jewish occupation of which was an accomplished fact, was an important discussion point. Our picture shows the Israeli delegates in conference at the beginning of the talks. Here are the United Nations representatives under the presidency of Dr. Bunch, the acting mediator.
On February the 22nd, 1949, after weeks of negotiations, the Israelis and the Egyptians signed an armistice. In the next 5 months, the other Arab states, except Iraq, signed similar agreements with the Israelis. The UN mapmakers drew up the armistice lines, separating the Israeli and Arab armies. The original UN partition plan gave the Zionists just over half the area of Palestine. But by the conclusion of hostilities in July 1949, the Israelis now possessed 3/4 of the land. Most of the remainder of Arab Palestine had been annexed by Jordan to become the area known as the West Bank. Jerusalem was split between Israel and Jordan. A narrow piece of Palestinian territory remained in Egyptian hands. This became known as the Gaza Strip. Palestine had disappeared. Israelis closed off their state from the rest of the land. As well as deterring Arab attackers, the barbed wire could also stop Palestinian refugees infiltrating back to their homes. 150,000 Palestinians were left inside the frontiers of the new Jewish state. A full peace treaty between Israel and the Arab states was never signed. Israel remained at war with her Arab neighbors.
The results of the War of Independence created a state of the Jewish nation. About 15% of the total population non-Jewish, 85% Jewish. And in a way, it facilitated to Israel to focus on its main purpose, bringing in Jewish immigrants, building our society, our nation, our economy, all the infrastructure of any normal nation.